Yesterday's prophecies, today's headlines. This is the Hal Lindsey Report. And now, Hal Lindsey.
Good evening and welcome to this edition of the Hal Lindsey Report. Earlier this month, the new left-wing government of Sweden's Prime Minister Stefan LOFVEN gave official recognition to the state of Palestine. A few days later, the British Parliament overwhelmingly voted for a non-binding but symbolically important resolution giving diplomatic recognition to the Palestinian state. Former British Foreign Minister Jack Straw, arguing for Palestine's recognition, said,
"The only thing the Israeli government, in my view, under its present demeanour of Bibi Netanyahu, understands is pressure. And what this House will be doing this evening will be to add to the pressure on the government of Israel."
In an opinion piece last week from the New York Times, GLICK, senior contributing editor of the Jerusalem Post, wrote, LOFVEN said, "A two-state solution requires mutual recognition and a will to peaceful coexistence. Sweden will therefore recognize the state of Palestine. PLO chief Mahmoud Abbas has pledged repeatedly over decades that he will never, ever recognize Israel." Doesn't anyone remember Gaza? Israel pulled out of there 9 years ago, left it to the Palestinians to do with it whatever they want, and the resulting disaster still reverberates. Israeli withdrawal didn't suddenly turn Gazans into peaceful citizens. They voted Hamas, an internationally recognized terror organization, into power. Ms. Glick continued, LOFVEN, Straw, and their colleagues throughout Europe aren't stupid. They know that if Israel succumbs to their political and economic warfare and cedes its capital city and historic heartland to its enemies, it will be unable to defend its remaining territory. And they know that, like Gaza, those areas will quickly be taken over by Hamas, which will use them to launch a war of annihilation against Israel in conjunction with its jihadist brethren in surrounding states. In other words, they know that in recognizing Palestine, they are not helping the cause of peace. They're advancing Israel's ruin. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry blames Israel for the worst things happening in the Middle East, including ISIS. Coming back from a Mideast trip last week, he said, "There wasn't a leader I met who didn't raise with me spontaneously the need to try to get peace between Israel and the Palestinians because it was a cause of recruitment and of street anger and agitation." Naftali Bennett, Israeli economy minister, said, "Even when a British Muslim beheads a British Christian, there will always be someone who blames the Jews." Kerry is right that Israel is a point of agitation for groups like ISIS. They follow the long Muslim tradition of hating Jews, but they would be just as outraged by a two-state solution as they are by the present state of Israel. They agitate and recruit based on the very existence of the Jewish state. They will not rest as long as Israel exists in any shape or form. And they don't just want to wipe out Israel. They want to rid the earth of every last Jew. Are Jews supposed to just curl up and die as a sacrifice for world peace? Even that would not work because ISIS and its ilk hates Christians as much as it hates Jews. Any Jew or Christian living anywhere in the world will always be an affront to their faith. So, when you hear Kerry and company call on Israel to sacrifice its security for peace, remember the appetite of radical Islam is insatiable. They don't want two states anywhere. They want one state everywhere, an Islamic state. Anyone joining the military knows he or she may be deployed into a battle zone where an enemy may kill him. Yet, he also knows he will be given thorough training for that mission. He will be taught the best methods for survival and for victory. But what if the enemy is a virus? If a warrior is sent to fight a disease, shouldn't he be taught how to fight and survive even against that enemy? President Obama has decided to send more than 3,000 American servicemen to join the fight against Ebola in Africa. The first American soldiers have now arrived in West Africa's Ebola hot zone. Were they well prepared? Their Ebola instruction worked like this. 2 trainers prepared 50 soldiers at a time, and the entire process took only 4 hours. Kent Brantley is a medical doctor. He went to serve in Liberia with humanitarian organization Samaritan's Purse. He began as a general practitioner, but soon after he arrived, the Ebola outbreak began. He became an expert on safely treating the deadly disease. Samaritan's Purse made him their medical director in Monrovia, Liberia. He made a video for fellow doctors and other medical workers on safely caring for Ebola patients. He taught courses on it, and then he caught the virus. He was a professional, a doctor, and an expert, and he caught the disease. In fact, every American known to have caught Ebola was medical professional, either a doctor or nurse. And we're sending young men and women into the hot zone with only 4 hours of gang training? It's ludicrous. Some argue that it doesn't matter because the soldiers won't be caring for patients as closely as Dr. Brantley. But in an interview on CNN last week, Brantley told Anderson Cooper, "I'm convinced that I did not get Ebola in the isolation unit. If the doctor is right, then he caught the virus the way so many other people in that part of the world are catching it, from sick people in public areas. Our soldiers are supposed to build their own places to stay, eventually. But the initial wave of personnel are staying in local hotels with other guests, and they can't possibly wear protective gear day and night. And the environment into which they're being thrust is almost overwhelming." HUGUES ROBERT-NICOUD is Emergency Program Manager for Doctors Without Borders in Monrovia. Reflecting on the frustration and ultimate hopelessness the aid workers battling Ebola feel, he described it this way: "It's this constant feeling that the boat's sinking. You try to plug the water that's coming in, but the holes are everywhere." I believe President Obama is right to send massive help to West Africa. These people are suffering, and we can help, and we have a moral obligation to do so. Helping them is also in our own interest if, and I emphasize the word if, the outbreak there begins to grow at the fantastic rates projected by the World Health Organization and the CDC, then no nation in the world will be safe from Ebola, no matter what precautions they put in place. It is imperative, then, that the disease be stopped where it is, but sending unprepared soldiers into the hot zone shows a level of incompetence that is hard to grasp. The president is right to send help, but not in a slipshod manner that does not respect the heroic men and women who have chosen to risk their lives to ensure the nation's security and way of life. We saw that same lack of forethought in the choice of Ron KLAIN to serve as the government's Ebola response coordinator, or in popular jargon, Ebola czar. KLAIN is little more than a political operative. He worked as chief of staff for Vice President Gore and Biden. He's a team player, a loyal Democrat, and the president likes him, but he's a lawyer, not a doctor. He has no medical expertise at all. CNN anchor Brooke Baldwin asked another prominent Democrat, ELAINE KAMARCK, of the Brookings Institute and a former colleague of KLAIN about his lack of credentials for this job. Baldwin asked, "Doesn't the nation need a medical expert at the helm at this time?" KAMARCK replied, "He's appointed Ron to coordinate the government response. The governmental response has little to do with the medicine part of the Ebola crisis." Sadly, I think she might be right. To this point, the governmental response has not been about medicine. It's been about politics. She said it has little to do with medicine, but it should have everything to do with medicine. Wouldn't it be better if the man heading up the effort had some understanding of the problem we're facing? Once again, the cronyism endemic to official Washington rears its ugly head. This is purely political appointment, a reward to a faithful political operative for years of reliable service, allowing him to pad his resume in case he chooses to run for office one day. But we need someone in the job who understands the intricacies of the problem from day one.